Okay, on to Facebook. Terry asks, Pastor Steve, when unsaved people are drinking with your newly saved spouse and justify their drinking because of the pain they're in, what is the godly response to that? They said they divorced their only child and grandchild because of their drinking, but failed to see maybe it was because of their own drinking. Any words of wisdom on this, or do you just still be quiet? Please pray for me. I am struggling being here, and I could rent a car and go back home 8 hours back alone. Would that be a better option?
Well, I think that obviously, if you're having a problem with your spouse and somebody else drinking with them, that's what the situation is.
Let me just read the first part.
Is this a lady that's asking the question?
It's Terry, and there's both a guy and a girl's picture on there, so I don't know if it's Terry guy or Terry gal.
Okay.
But it says, when unsaved people are drinking with your newly saved spouse and are justifying their drinking because of the pain they are in, and it goes on.
Yeah, that's one of those things that obviously there needs to be some communication between you and your spouse. If it's a wife with a husband, a lot of times wives will be quiet about those things because the Bible talks about having a submissive heart towards them. I'm going to read you a passage out of 1 Peter chapter 3. It says, "Wives, likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear." And it's the idea of a respect. "Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle, quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner in former times, though holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid with any terror." And then it says, "Husbands likewise dwell with them," talking about the wives, "with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another, love as brothers, be tenderhearted, be courteous." And, when you look at passages like that, the Bible does talk about the fact that the woman is to treat her husband like she would treat the Lord, like she would treat Jesus. And that's a good thing. In that passage, it says that you can win a husband without a word, just by your conduct. That doesn't mean that you don't get to say a word. What it's talking about is the fact that wives have a tendency to say things over and over and over and over, and think that their words are going to change things. That's what happens when you deal with women, and what God is recognizing is that men don't work the same way. So when I'm talking to a lady about her relationship with her husband, and when things are going south, like what's being described here, I ask them, "Have you told your husband what the problem is? Have you talked to them about the issue?" And if they say yes, I've talked to him a couple of different times. I ask them, secondly, "Do you think he understands?" "Well, he's not doing it, so he must not understand." No, does he understand? Does he understand the issues that are involved? And at some point, I'll get them to say yes, because they have explained it to him. And then I go, "Okay, now at this point, then you need to stop talking to him about it, and just live the kind of life that God wants you to live in front of him." And what God does is he goes after the guy. And frankly, there's another passage that talks about pouring heaps of coals on a man's head by doing good to him. Mm-hmm. When you have a situation like that, and that's what God does. It's how guys get changed. But it doesn't mean that you don't say anything. And so that right there, that situation, if this is coming from Terry, a girl, that deserves a good sit down with your husband and have a real good talk with him. I understand that he's a new believer and that kind of thing, but you need to have a talk with him, and you need to talk to him about what this is doing to your marriage, and if kids are involved, all the stuff that's going on there. The person who's doing that, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl that's coming in and drinking with them, but either one. A guy who's coming in and drinking with your husband because he's got such a hard life is a whiny baby, and he needs to knock it off. I don't care if he's a Christian or not. That's just nonsense. That's just a crybaby type of situation. Sorry. It's like I'm kind of old school on all that kind of stuff. This is not an old movie where we go down to the bars and we get blasted because life hasn't gone well. It's like, man up and get your act together. Obviously, the guy needs to know the Lord, and so you may be instrumental in being involved with that. If that whole thing's flipped over, it still ends up being basically the same thing. If the wife is the one who's doing the drinking, the husband needs to have a talk with her. And there are things that are worth fighting about, and things that are going to wreck your marriage like this are things that are worth having a conversation and even an argument over. And the Bible talks about the fact that we need to be standing up for righteousness and doing the right thing in a situation. So, husband or wife, your goal in your marriage is, number one, you please God in the things that you do. And so that's number one always. And so I put Jesus above my wife. And when it's a choice between what Jesus wants to do and what my wife wants to do, my wife loses in that situation. Now, fortunately, I have a wife who loves the Lord, and she's been walking with him for a long time. And so I don't generally have to make those choices, but that is the choice that I would be making. So Jesus comes first always. And then the second thing that I keep in mind is that I am not supposed to be doing what my spouse wants me to necessarily. What I'm supposed to be doing is what's right by them. And so there are times when submitting to something is what's right by my spouse, because in the end, God's going to use it to turn things around. And things can be uncomfortable and that kind of stuff for a period of time. But what I'm going to do is what's right by them, and allowing my marriage to be torn apart is not what's right by my spouse. And so I need to keep that in mind. That could be a judgment call, and that's something that you need to be praying about. But there's a great example of this in the Old Testament with Abigail in 1 Samuel chapter 25. Abigail has a choice between doing what her husband has made it clear that he wants done, or actually saving his life and saving the life of everyone in his household. And what she does is she watches her husband's back. And so same thing towards my wife. I am always in the business of watching my wife's back. And my wife is in the business of watching my back. That's how submission is supposed to go. And it's not that I arbitrarily go off and do what I feel needs to be done in every single situation. I just do what's right. So I want to do what's right by the Lord, and I want to do what's right by my marriage, and I want to do what's right by my spouse. And you keep those things in mind, and it's gonna help you to make some right decisions in this situation. Sometimes what's right by my spouse is throwing the other bum out.
That's what I was going to say, And I know I can kind of rowdy or whatever, but if if someone's they're drinking with my spouse and she's a brand new believer and I'm having issues, he's gone.
Yeah.
Or she. Or whatever. By the collar if necessary.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, get them out of there. They're obviously in the situation with a brand new believer. That's, there are things that Satan does to try to keep somebody from actually following the Lord. And that's a great one. A guy comes in or a girl comes in and is having all kinds of problems, and so they decide to have a drinking session in your house, stumble your husband or your wife. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I would be praying about that. And obviously you bathe this stuff in prayer. You pray about things before you do them, and but you need to make right stands in a situation. And so retreating, and it sounds to me like this is probably a lady. Retreating and going to your parents' house is not that would not be my first option. You need to be putting the Lord, your marriage first in those situations. So it goes, in my marriage it's Jesus, then my marriage, then my wife, and then kids, that kind of stuff are involved in mine, and then me is how that goes. Those are the priorities. So,
also, too, being a brand new believer, take them through 1 Corinthians and stuff about liberties, and not only their own, but stumbling other people.
Right.
Because if they're a brand new believer, maybe they come out of the drinking world. But it also says in here that whoever this person's life is has had issues maybe because of their drinking. So show them look, dude, you came out of the world. What was your life when you were doing like that stuff? Now you're a believer. Take them through what the new life's supposed to look like, and maybe if they're brand new and they'll be open to it.
Yeah. Romans chapter 14 is a great passage on Christian liberties, and like Matt's talking about, passages like Romans chapter or 1 Corinthians chapter 8, 1 Corinthians chapter 10 talk about some liberties. So,
okay, good on that.
Yep.